If you do any kind of paper crafting, you probably have paper pads like this, and then you have pieces of paper like this. So in this video, I want to show you one other project you can make with all these paper scraps. I'd like to show you in this video how to make paper beads. So how do you make these paper beads? I've got all kinds of different sizes, different lengths, different shapes. You can create cylinder beads. I'll show you in this video. To do this, I'm using this little wooden gadget called a V3 multi-pin paper bead rolling machine. It has two different size pins depending on the core of the bead. So if you want a bead that has a larger hole, you're gonna use the larger one, and if you want one that's really tiny like this, then you would use the smaller pin. So for this, what will you do? Each of these poles has holes in it, a larger hole and a smaller hole. I'm just gonna take these out. A larger hole and a smaller hole, so depending on which one you're using. If you need the smaller one, then the easiest way to turn this in is I put this in and then turn it using this as the leverage. I'm just gonna use the larger hole for this. So that goes in. This has a slit in it, and that's where the paper is going to go. And for the beads, what you need to do is figure out what size bead you want and what shape bead you want. So if you want one that's kind of tapered in the middle, then you're going to use a piece of paper this big. The width here will determine what size bead you end up with. So the wider this area is, the bigger the bead is gonna be. The narrower this is, the smaller the bead is gonna be this way, the height of it. And then if you decide you want a cylinder like this for the bead, then you need to start with a strip of paper that's just the same width from top to bottom. So once you have your strips of paper cut out, and if you'll notice, it's not cut off to an angle, it's actually cut so that the triangle is this paper here, instead of the triangle being kind of like this, where it's this shape, the triangle is even this way. Okay, if you'll notice, this is not 90, this is 90 degrees, this is not. So this is the kind of bead, this is certainly another type of bead that you can create, but this is the one that I'm using in the tutorial here. So once you have your piece of paper, and let's say we'll choose this one, you insert the paper into the little slot here. So just put it right in here, and then you start turning this. And as you start turning this, you'll notice the paper is here and it's tight against the metal rod. And what you want to do at this point is want to make sure that the paper doesn't kind of stray off to the side. You're keeping it in the same position in the center. And I'm applying a little bit of pressure on this end to make sure that the bead is tight. And just keep turning. And then, you know, as you do more and more of these, you can go pretty fast to make sure that it's straight. You can also adjust here if you need to push this a little bit. So once I get to this point, I will put just a dab of glue, and you can use art glitter glue. I have this Tombow liquid glue, which has a very tiny point on it, so whichever glue you decide to use. And I do like to put a little piece, just so I don't get too much glue on the wood part. I put a little piece of paper here so that I can apply the glue. So you can apply just a dab of glue, that's all it's gonna take to hold that part. And then just continue with this. And this plate will apply enough pressure against the bead to make sure that the paper sticks. Just make sure it's centered. And then there you have your bead. At this point, I take this off and I hold it so that I can slide the bead off. And there is your bead. So this is a very tiny bead, As I mentioned, if you start with a paper that's extra wide here, you're gonna end up with a much bigger bead. And that's really the process for all of them. You know, whether it's the cylinder one, and you do need to clean this occasionally because it does get sticky from the glue. And the longer this is, will also give you a much thicker bead. That's the more it's gonna go around this way. But you can use some really pretty papers, just like this one. It had gold foil on it, so that's a really pretty paper. But the process is the same for all of them. You just insert that in there, and then you can go pretty fast once you've done a few of these. And then you just slide it off. I do glaze all of these. It will give it a nice shine, just like in this. This is already metallic. Let me see if I have any other ones that are shiny. So this is another one that was already glazed. Most of these have not been glazed yet. To glaze them, what I do is I use a skewer like this so I can put the bead on it. I guess I should use one that I just did. So here I'll use this one. I'll put the bead on the skewer. And then I'm using this Deco Art triple thick glaze. And it does take 24 hours for this to dry completely. I will use a brush to glaze this. And then once I glaze it, I came up with this little handy dandy holder. Just a styrofoam cup. I pierce through here. And what I'll do is once I glaze this, I will transfer the bead onto here so that it dries. Now, the one thing is you don't want to have this tilting too much, because then what will happen is they will all kind of fall towards the cup. So I want enough of a tilt on the cup so that it stays flat like this versus at an angle. I'll take the bead, put it on my skewer that's temporary, and I just brush the glaze onto the bead. You don't want to put it on too thick. Now once I have it glazed, I will transfer it onto my drying rack. And then just let it sit there for 24 hours for it to dry. Once they are dry, so these two are already glazed, and I wanted to show you a couple of things you can do with it. Now, here's a keychain that I did. Just put the paper bead on here and then a couple of additional beads. What you can do with the beads is get end caps for them. Depending on the kind of bead that you use on the end, you may not have to, but this is what the end cap ring looks like. And this gets glued in. It is a very small, just a cylinder that gets put on into each end of the bead so that it looks more finished instead of having the rough edge like this. And unfortunately, I don't have any more of those to show you as far as putting them on the end, but you just put a little bit of glue on here and then insert the end cap on it. And then at this point, I'm just taking a couple of additional beads. I'll use a couple of head pins to build this on, and I'm just taking this bead, put it on, and then this on the end. And I will put one more on this to kind of close it. Now if you had, even if you have an end cap on your bead like this, it would still be, you would still need to do some kind of bead, otherwise it kind of jiggles too much on it. So I put the bead on, put one more bead to hold it in place, and then this we can close. So I will cut some of this off because it's just a little too long. So once you've cut it off, the way I close these, I fold this over to 90 degrees like this, and then I twist it around to create a loop. So we'll do the other one here. And then these just get attached to the hook for the earring. So with some paper beads, I created these really pretty earrings, and you can, this is another way you can use up all those scraps of paper. You know, when you've got little strips like this, you can make all kinds of fun earrings. And here's the keychain as I showed you before. So imagine all the pretty earrings you can make with, you know, like all these paper patterns, and just make your own bead. I hope this video was helpful for you to make some fun earrings with all those scraps of paper that you have. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next project.